If you're a pop culture junkie who loves TV, film, music, comedy, and other really important stuff, then you've come to the right place. Get ready and settle in for Classic Conversations, the best pop culture interviews in the world. That's right, we circled the globe so you don't have to. If you're ready to be the king of the water cooler, then you're ready for Classic Conversations with your host, Jeff Dwoskin.
All right, Sarah, thank you so much for that amazing introduction to get the show going each and every week. And this week was no exception. Welcome, everybody, to episode 319 of Classic Conversations. That's right, I'm throwing a bonus at you because we got a special occasion in front of us. Bob Eckstein has returned to the show. He's back. He's got a new book, and we are here to talk all about it. It is so exciting. Last time Bob was here, we talked all about the history of the snowman, and now Bob has a brand new book, and he wanted to swing by and tell us all about it. We're diving deep in just a few seconds. And in these few seconds, don't miss this full week of creativity come to life. Rob Sayer, Bill Barrett was here earlier this week, episode 318, talking about their movie they just wrapped, Beyond the Rush. Great story. You're going to love it. Be inspired. And today we're going to be inspired as well. I'm excited to share my conversation with Bob with you. Enjoy. All right, everyone, I'm excited to welcome back award-winning illustrator, writer, cartoonist for the New Yorker, New York Times, Reader's Digest, a million other things. He wrote the history of the snowman, knows more about snowmen than anyone in the world. We're not going into that in this episode, but you can catch episode 225 of Classic Conversations where Bob and I went deep into the history of snowmen, so check that out. Bob's book, Footnotes from the World's Greatest Bookstores, was a New York Times bestseller, and now he's going to take the world by storm with Footnotes from the most fascinating museums, stories, and memorable moments from people who love museums. Welcome back to the show, Bob Eckstein. Oh, what's up?
Jeff, thanks so much. I'm taking you on the road with me. That was great. I love the energy.
It's from years of emceeing in comedy clubs and
No, I'm really glad you brought me back. This is nice, and it's good to see you again.
It's always great with these podcasts to meet awesome people such as yourself, and then to extend that friendship and the relationship, and you have new things and we can talk about them again and spread the word once again. I'm excited. I think you might have mentioned this book last time we were talking, if I remember correctly, but why museums? Bob, why are we diving into museums? Where did your love for museums stem from? You paint it? Because this book is it's paintings, it's deep dives into museums. It's a whole treasure. So what brought you to this path?
It's a complicated question because it's different ways I attack this book. One was how to make the next project as much fun as possible. So I'm always looking not to say like, what do I have to do, but what do I really want to do? As I'm trying to like cherry pick the jobs I do now. I've eliminated some of the things I do to make a living, and they decide I'm just going to try to do things I really love. So during the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about how museums were struggling. They weren't doing that great. Attendance was down. And because I love artwork, I kept on thinking about museums and how this might raise awareness, but at the same time, for selfish reasons, what do I want to do when I get a chance to travel again? Where would I be going? And I was thinking in terms of also like driving to places. I wasn't going to leave and go to Europe. I was going to keep someplace in the continent. And I thought, I want to go back and look at artwork. I mean, I wasn't always a fan of museums. Growing up, I used to hate museums as a kid because my mom used to drag us to these places and made us read everything as a kid. Our idea of a vacation was Washington, D.C., which was dreadful. But this time around, it was so much fun to go all these museums.
Why do you think museums get such a bad rap? I mean, it's like when you were saying that, I was thinking the same thing. It's like as a kid, a museum is like the last place in the world you want to go. I feel like when you're an adult and you can appreciate museums, they're the greatest places to go. We went to New Orleans and we went to the World War II Museum. Oh. We spent 4 hours there. We could have spent 8 hours there. It was just incredible. I think my dad instilled in me a love of museums. I remember going back as far as, I think we were in Niagara Falls and we went to the Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum, and we would stop and read every single thing along the way. And then the whole rest of the family was out there hating us. They just whipped right by. All right, tallest guy, shortest woman, bye. And there's something about the nuance of details that museums bring to the table that.
Well, there's a few reasons. Because our parents dragged us to the museums as a kid. So right off the bat, we were already on the wrong step. That my parents were going to read all the signs in that Jeopardy voice. My mom had put on this special voice when she was going to read the plaques, and it was just terrible. But even older people don't like museums too. They want to skip parts. They just say, "Oh yeah, I'm done," and they start drifting off and walking places they're not supposed to, where they have those red velvet barriers. People are walking behind it. But the thing is museums have changed a lot. We have this perception of museums from our olden days, but if you go now, everything has kind of changed a lot. For starters, let's say just car museums, you can see car collections of any type of car. So I went to a collection in LA of just James Bond cars, just all the cars from the James Bond movies. It was fantastic. And there were similar things like that, museums that are not what you imagine, but when you get there, it's like a whole different experience.
Sorry to interrupt, but I assume you're all daydreaming at this point about your favorite museum. So thought I'd take a moment to thank you for supporting our sponsors. When you support our sponsors, you're supporting us here at Classic Conversations, and that's how we keep the lights on. And now back to my conversation with Bob.
One other example is this museum called, I'm not going to say the name of it and spoil it for them, but there is a museum out there that's in my book, and I'll let you find out which one it is, that everything is fake. Everything on the exhibit is made up. And I didn't even know this until I was long finished with the tour. And I started asking myself these questions. Doesn't make sense. How could this be? How could that be? The stuff was so strange and stuff. And then after talking to people, I kind of put two and two together and solved this mystery. So this is totally different than our usual museum experience as children. This is a whole different ballgame now.
Well, now with interactivity taken to just the nth degree of what you can do. And, it's interesting. I remember going to Ellis Island and doing the tour there, and then you can put in headphones and it can a guided tour along the way. You type in a number. So there's so many ways that you can experience things now.
Yes. It's also different in the way what you get out of the museum. The museums now can be so much fun. There's a new museum I'm going to soon called the National Comedy Center. And when you first go in, they first make you take a quick little quiz so they can determine your sense of humor. And then once you figure out that your sense of humor is, they give you a wristband, and the wristband will interact with the room. And then the material that shows up in the room reflects your sense of humor. I mean, it's all state of the art, and it's nothing like we've ever experienced in a museum before.
That's incredible. Where is this museum at?
This is in Jamestown, New York. And let me ask you, Jeff, why is it in Jamestown, New York?
I don't know. Why?
That's the birthplace of Lucille Ball. It started off as a Lucille Ball museum for comedy geeks. She's really a big part of comedy. And then they spun it out into this new thing where it includes everyone. George Carlin is featured, and everyone that you could think of, all the big comedians are all featured in this center. Like I said, everything is interactive now. They make everything more fun. For instance, there's a karaoke bar. And there's a whole part where you go on stage and you actually do some stuff and you reenact stuff. So it's totally different from what we imagine a museum being like. And also the museums are filled with beautiful young people as well. You go there, you socialize, it's got a party atmosphere. The Brooklyn Museum has parties. And there's a Spam Museum. Spam Museum has one special room that's a recreation of Monty Python's Spam skit. When they go spam, 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 spam. I might have name dropped this before on your show that I'm friends with Michael Palin. And so I was telling him about this room, and we were going back and forth a bit. But at first, we weren't getting each other's emails, and we found it was in the spam folder. And that's a true story. We actually found our emails in the spam folder. But he didn't know about that room, but got a great kick out of it. And that's another example of how the museums are kind of surprising you. Until you go, you don't realize how much they've changed from yesteryear.
I want to check out that comedy thing. They figured out a way so no one gets offended, right? If you like blue, then
That's exactly why they do it. And it's so subjective. Humor is so funny. I mean, right now, I'm like so geared into this whole topic of how comedy is changing because it's affecting my business, affecting my bottom line. I'm now getting cartoons sold and bought at places that are buying me for certain reasons that are not just on merit. Not just because of the cartoon, but for other outside reasons. And for the same reasons, I'm not getting bought at different publications because everything now is so optically sensitive. Everyone wants to either be anti-woke or woke. And so there's so many sensitivities and quotas that are being met and stuff. So it's really a big game changer in comedy, this idea of what is funny.
right. No, I hear you. Let's in terms of the book, though, getting back to the book for a second, is this is a collection of paintings. You matched up a painting to the museums and then kind of talk a little bit about the museum. Was part of picking the museums for the book the ones that inspired you from an artistic point of view to be able to visualize and create something?
Well, there's a whole bunch of factors, and it's like somewhat case by case. Like sometimes I would be given a story that I knew was so great. Yes, we're going to put the museum in. For instance, I was having lunch with the curator of the Philadelphia Museum, and he was explaining a story in which one day, as everyone was coming to work, they caught one of the employees having sex on one of the beds in the period rooms with one of the very sexy security guards that everyone had been talking about how sexy this guy was. And they were caught and they got into trouble. And there's a whole story about how they had to get, well, I'm trying to say this delicately. I've already put myself in a couple of landmines with these pauses. I'm trying to be careful what I say. In this case, the case went to HR, in which the person in charge of the museum's personnel said, it says clearly in the employee handbook that no one is allowed to touch the artwork. So I certainly know you're not allowed to do this on the artwork. The person actually got fired. So that sort of story, which I cleaned up a bit for the book, is definitely a must keeper for the book, as well as stories like Michelle Obama having her first date with Barack Obama at the Art Institute in Chicago, or at the same museum, Bill Murray contemplating suicide, but this painting in the museum convinced him otherwise, and it changed his life. So stories like that, dictated what my choices were. There's a zillion museums in the country. It's very hard to select. There's about 7,000 museums. There's about 800 in Massachusetts alone. And I did research on about 150 of the best. And then from there, I narrowed it down to 75. And I had to pick them based on how important they were to the community, the value they gave to a family maybe on vacation. Should they stop at this museum? Their importance regarding history, preserving all of our achievements. So there's all different factors. And then, of course, there's how sexy was the museum. Is it beautiful? Does it have that wow factor that should be in the book? So, painted, and it makes people get excited about going to that destination. So after all of these are said and done, I picked out the best ones, and a lot got on the cutting room floor. And hopefully the book does well enough that there's a sequel, because I do feel bad that a lot of museums got cut who were hoping to be in the book.
Well, that's your fault for getting them excited about being in a museum book and then cutting them.
There are some museums I want to be taken out because I had a great story and they know it was a good story. And then they had second thoughts about letting the story out. It was too sensational. And in some cases I said, no, I'm running the story. And a couple of places they involved lawyers and it wasn't worth the aggravation. I have plenty to choose from. There's a lot of great museums. Everyone's so fearful. I know I'm getting off the subject of books again, but this spills into what I was touching upon with comedy. People are so afraid of things. And so that's definitely an issue I had with this book, is making people happy in regards to what they were worried about, the optics of different things getting out and stuff. But I try to hold my own and keep to my guns and try to say, these stories are really entertaining. And people are going to love hearing these stories. They're human.
Can you share one of the stories in a generic way, maybe, so you don't get sued, about the ones that they wouldn't let you use? Like the general gist of...
It was often the story about how someone got excited about a certain museum and why they wanted to work at that place. So they would describe their first day of work and talk about how emotional they would get over a certain piece of artwork or how it changed their life. And there was nothing bad about that, but they felt all of a sudden they would get in trouble with the employee explaining their process of like what it was like to try to get work there. One example was a woman who was interviewing at this museum, and she said she was so in awe of the work once she was there in person that she got the flop sweats. And in her interview, she was just a total basket case because she was surrounded by this majestic artwork. And the moment was so big for her. So there's nothing wrong with that story. It's a nice story. But then after contemplating it, they said, oh, I don't want to share this. I don't want my employee to see this. And then I said, well, that's fine, but you didn't say anything wrong. And then they said, well, if you're going to insist, I'm going to get my lawyers. And then I would hear from people. After that, I was like, okay, there's great stories out there. I don't have to use every one, but people are so sensitive about their experience and how they're going to come off. Everyone wants to be, seen nice. I have one story I want to share quickly, and that is a museum had this great story about how they had an art installation with live bees, and they regret the decision to allow these bees to be in this piece of artwork. And of course, you know how this story is going to go. The bees got loose. They had to evacuate the museum, and they had to, deal with this total catastrophe. And then the artist felt so bad that they came back with these honey lollipops to give out to all the different patrons who went to visit the museum as sort of a peace offering. And the museum explained how that was worse than the live bees because the honey was melting on all those different pieces of artwork and sculpture, and it was a total disaster. So this story was given to me by one of the curators, and it was their most memorable moment in the museum, of course. It's a great story.
Follow-up question. How many bees are we talking about?
I think it was 150.
150 bees?
Yeah, so they're keeping count, and they had to bring in a person who's going to handle it. The person initially in charge of this sort of thing was allergic to bees, adding to the complexity of solving this problem. So long story short, the book goes to print, and then the museum decides they don't want to share the bee story, that they said that they'd rather keep this to themselves. But the bee stories in the book, I try to explain to them that these are the sort of things that people love to read about. People want to hear what people have for challenges, what goes beyond the curtain at these museums that people have to deal with all the time.
That's a great story. Do you have any similar stories from the La Brea tar pits of the dinosaurs getting loose?
Have you been there?
I haven't, but that is one place I do want to go. All the museums in your book or the ones that got cut, have you physically been to them all? Or did you revisit them for the book or?
Combination. Logistically, it's impossible to go to 150 museums in 2 years. But I did go to as many as I could. I went to the West Coast. I went to the Midwest. I traveled everywhere and hit as many museums as possible. And in other cases, I had been to the museum already before the book started. I did go to museums, throughout the East Coast. So I already had stories from them. In some cases, I sent people. I'd have someone go in my place and they would do collaboration with me. So it was a definite team effort. But going back to the tar pits, which are in LA, there's one little thing I remember about them to share is that you have these recreations of these woolly mammoth, enormous monstrous animals set inside a caged area as if they are alive and like they could get loose. I thought that was so amazing that like they fenced in the area as if these were going to, get loose. And then set behind this fenced area are modern day buildings. You see like a skyline for LA set next to these dinosaurs.
When someone buys this book, which is a gorgeous book, what do you hope that they get from this book? Are we trying to get people to go to those museums or just any museums, rediscover museums?
Ideally, I hope it's a bucket list that people say, okay, summification's coming up. What do we want to do? No, we're not going to go on a cruise. We're not going to go to the water parks. Let's see if we can go to some of these museums. So in the book, I've selected books that I thought would touch all different groups of people and reach all different demographics of age and interests. So I feel like there's something in there for everyone. There's for like train buffs, there's stuff in there. if you like classical artwork, yes. But if you like music, there's music museums. If you're a writer, there's some writing museums. So I feel like there's something there for everyone to say this summer they're going to hit the museum. And then they go to the museum and they say, oh my God, I took this for granted. Museums are great. Let's go to another one. And for me, to hear people enjoy the book that way, to me, that would be like the best thing. I know some people said, well, you're showing your artwork. Don't you want people just to say that the pictures look nice and stuff like that? The pictures I did the best job I could. I enjoyed doing it, but that's kind of like background music. That's just meant to try to entice you to go and physically go to the museum.
Well, it's amazing. I think people who love museums will want this book. I think if you know someone who loves museums, this makes an amazing gift as well. It's gorgeous. And the art is amazing, Bob. You're amazing. So where can people get their copies? It's just everywhere, like Amazon. Do you sell it at your website? Get a signed copy? What's the dealio with that?
Well, ideally, as a person who's been advocating for independent bookstores for years, I always ask, if you can, go to your local bookstore to support them. Any local bookstore can order this book. It's available anywhere. And now I know people want to have the choice of where they buy. They want to buy it on, let's say, bookshop.org. Bookshop.org is an alternative to Amazon that gives some of the proceeds to independent bookstores. If you want to buy it from Amazon, you're maybe an Amazon Prime customer, or that's the only alternative you have. A lot of people don't have a bookstore near them. You could buy it there as well. So what I suggest is if you go to my website, there's a link to all of these choices. You could go to maybe 6 different places to buy the book, so you could pick your preference. And if you go to my website, you could also then sign on to a newsletter. And the newsletter is free. And it's great for people who are in the arts, like writing or cartooning or illustration. I provide professional tips and advice. And they're not just from me, but I happen to know like some of the best in the profession, and I share their advice. I've been asking them for help. I learned from them. And then in turn, I share it on my newsletter. And my newsletter has a lot of great subscribers, people who are very funny in the world, including some of the biggest names like, Jack Handy, Sarah Silverman, Alan Zibel is on there, Michael Palin, all these comedians subscribe to my newsletter, and they also contribute, and they provide some of the tips and stuff. So it's a fun place. There's some cartoons, and you could sign there with no obligation. You have to pay for anything. As a matter of fact, you can email me personally if you want the paid version, and I'll give it to you. I especially give it to students and seniors for free because I just want to spread the word. It helps me because it builds my brand. And the more you get to know me, the more maybe you'll like my books, and I convince you to get my books. So it's a sort of a back and forth. I get a lot out of it as well.
Awesome. I'm a subscriber. So yeah, and all of Bob's books are awesome. Not just the one we're talking about today. Footnotes from the most fascinating museums. And that is one that you should check out now. But then check out History of the Snowman. And there's a bunch of amazing books, Bob's repertoire.
And let me mention that the website to get to me, it's if you just do like bobeckstein.com, but I'm sure you'll provide the link.
Yeah, I'll put all the links in the show notes to all your socials.
Oh, thanks. So if you just type in Bob and Snowman, you'll find me that way too. This is fun to talk about museums. This is like one of the first podcasts. And so that I'm doing so far to promote the book. And I'm really excited about what's going to happen where people are really going to get back out there and wipe away the bad memories as kids.
Yeah, and then I'm going to lobby for the Henry Ford Museum, Greenfield Village, for the sequel book.
That's in there.
Oh, it is?
Oh, it's in there. That's a great place to go. And
I didn't see it on the list. Where is it?
Oh, it's in there. It's also where the Thomas Edison lab is.
Oh, that's right. It is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's Greenfield Village. Yeah.
It's a real cluster of smarty pants.
All right. Awesome. Here's the Detroit Institute of Arts is in there. So yeah, I fully endorse this.
Okay. Now we're good.
I mostly endorsed it before. Now I fully endorse.
I felt a lot of love.
Bob, wishing you all the luck with this. And we will talk again one day when you do more goodness. Thanks for hanging out with me.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
All right, everyone, the amazing Bob Eckstein. Do not miss Footnotes from the most fascinating museums. Bob has so many great books: Elements of Stress, Illustrated History of the Snowman, History of the Snowman, Footnotes from the World's Greatest Bookstores, complete book of cat names. You can get all of it at his website. Links in the show notes. Check that out. Please support your local bookstores. Of course, I mentioned Amazon, but Bob listed all some great ones as well. And so check those out and we'll just get the book. That's it. It's gorgeous. Makes a great gift, I got to tell you. Glad Bob swung by. Another episode is over. Bonus for everyone. Yay, you get a bonus and you get a bonus and you get a bonus episode. Thanks again to Bob Eckstein. Thanks again to all of you for coming back week after week. It does mean the world to me. It really does. And I'll see you next time.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Classic Conversations. If you like what you heard, don't be shy and give us a follow on your favorite podcast app. Also, why not go ahead and tell all your friends about the show? You strike us as the kind of person that people listen to. Thanks in advance for spreading the word, and we'll catch you next time on Classic Conversations.